Today I am delighted to speak with Kimberly Braun. Kimberly, you spent over a decade as a monastic nun exploring the path of presence. You have a master's in theology with special focus upon the adult spiritual journey, and you are a Reiki master, ordained minister, author, and TEDx speaker. You are passionate about inspiring others to connect to and live from divine love. Kimberly, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. Such a pleasure to speak
Thank
with you.
you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you as well.
This is such a wonderful and warming smile. So thank you. That it's the most beautiful beginning, I think, for this conversation. And today I would like to explore with you, Kimberly, saying yes, among other things, but and I'm saying that based on your TEDx talk, which we will talk about a little bit later on. Before we go there, let me ask you. So your life journey has been quite remarkable. Can you share a key defining moment or experience that was particularly transformative for you and the insights you got from it?
Yes, absolutely. When I was 5 or 6 years old, we lived in Ohio, and I'm total geek. I love school, love school. So, and we would walk to and from school. It was that day and age where you could do that and no one worried. And in the autumn, when school would start, it was so beautiful in Ohio. And it felt to me like the whole world was dancing with the change of the leaves and the temperature and the little bit of wind. And I would find myself filled with that joy so much of this dance in nature that I would oftentimes dance my way home. And one time I was whirling, and I knew nothing about Sufi dervishes, but I was whirling my way home and was filled with such a really deep presence. And I reached the end of our street. We lived on a cul-de-sac, and I would just stopped, and I was in complete silence and just enjoying the sense of it all. And as I was in that state, a tree across the street caught my attention. It was like it just pulled me right into looking at it. And then one leaf on that tree pulled me into an awareness of it. And as that leaf was there, it was teetering on the branch. And then it broke off the branch and started winding its way down to the ground. And I was filled with such sweetness, but out of nowhere, completely, Ajay, completely unexpected, this deep existential sadness came. And something within me with no words said, is that it? Is that like all life is about? We're moving towards death? That's what it felt like. But what happened in that moment was the moment the existential grief rose from deep within, time stopped. And it felt like, I say the beloved for source and consciousness, felt like veils were pulled back. And I had this direct experience that in my language of the time, that the leaf was in God and God was in the leaf. And without any jump mentally, my whole being experienced that I was in this eternal source and that all life was about one thing, being and becoming this. And it wiped away any concern I had around death. Just completely, it doesn't even exist for me. And it set me upon a path that has the awareness that this is the adventure of what it means to be alive, period, for me. And so everything I do is oriented with that worldview. And it has stayed, I'm 56 now, and it has stayed so alive for me that 51 years later, it's still the worldview that is true for me. While many of my truths have changed over the years, that remains very dynamic. And it remains a place where I can be of greatest service for people to come to a place of freedom. I think we're meant to be free. And we're meant to be spontaneous in our love and our sense of curiosity in life, and our um, subtle belief that we're here for a beautiful, noble purpose. So that's a pretty big key insight that came, and it's still there for me. That's one.
It certainly sounds like it. There were so many things that I could take the conversation towards from what you said, because there were so many of them. But the one that I choose, or it jumps out for me the most to go to, you talked about presence, and you said that you had that moment of presence. And when you were saying that, you reminded me of the story that you share on your TEDx talk, where again you speak of a moment of presence, of silence, which I think again you said, and through that an insight or something created. So tell me about that moment of presence, of
Mm.
silence. How accessible is that to each of us? Or is it something that for you, comes easily because of some other reason?
So I do think that there are parts of my path that I came into the world with an orientation in
Mhm,
that way.
mhm,
That was one of many childhood experiences. So in that way, I think every path is unique. And where we are in relation to presence will be part of the beauty of our journey. There's not like a better or a worse or a more or a less.
mhm.
With that, I believe that this presence is the very center of our being and is fully accessible to every human being at all times, regardless of mental anguish, regardless of emotional trauma, that there are simple things that are available, simple tools, simple perspectives, simple techniques that every single person can do to help cultivate the capacity to drop into the moment. And with that, one of the ways that I find that's most valuable in helping others understand that it's possible, because it can feel like it's not possible. I mean, this world is filled with so many stressors, outside, inside. There are so many understandable reasons for humans to feel depressed and anxious and all sorts of things that are disconnected from themselves. But in dropping in, even in just a moment, and developing the capacity for that, the individual discovers who they are. And they discover that they are actually much more than their circumstances, much more than the events in their lives, much more than the choices that they've made. Now that's incredible, because we're taught that our choices make who we are. They form patterns in us, they form habits within us, but we are even much more than all of that. So I believe it's fully accessible, and that it's actually very important that we care about that question and seek an answer to that question. So if you're listening, saying, is it possible for me, is a very tender and important question that deserves for you to find the answer.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And let me take it one step further, because you mentioned some simple tools and techniques that one can use to cultivate that capacity to get to the present moment. So share one with us.
One thing that I find myself doing is entering into each moment, regarding the moment as an instrument of grace or a teacher for me. So that's a perspective, that's an orientation that opens me up to what is alive in the moment. So that's a little bit of using the mind to cultivate a habit of looking. For instance, like coming onto this call with you, I sat for a moment and I recognized that coming into this conversation with you is some form of grace for me, as well as for you and anyone else that participates. And in that, then, I can bring a sense of open expectation or hope that I may discover something that I had not discovered before. So that's one tool. Another tool, which is a little bit easier, is every person. I've not met one person that has not at some point in their life had one experience where they felt that they were filled with a sweet peace, even if it was fleeting, perhaps like looking at a sunset, the birth of a child, where they're taken into a place that they fall away and they're simply there. Remembering those moments, writing about them, talking about them, telling the stories about them, taking time to inquire about them more deeply, giving ourselves a chance can then help us to awaken, to realize that that moment may seem isolated, but it's just an example of what every moment could be. So it's kind of like when you go to the banquet, right? And you eat at the banquet, and and if you're eating at the banquet, then you feel the banquet and you get used to having a banquet. We cultivate that capacity for being available to the fullness of life. And in a short conversation like this, I don't want to diminish or trivialize the layers that we all need to move through that arise. We have trauma, collective and individual, that we carry. And so I would never want to poo-poo the process that's involved in that. But coming into presence offers us the spaciousness to meet it in new ways.
I was about to ask you actually what you just said, that, that perspective that everything is grace. When one is going through challenges or suffering, it is more difficult, or it's not something that it comes easily for someone to accept that this too also is grace. So I think you explained, as far as I understood, that it is we don't have to we shouldn't underestimate the process, because it will require some work to be done. That's how I perceive it. So tell me, what do you think of that?
Yes, I entirely agree with you. It's funny because in my book that talks about the project and the TED Talk, one of my foundational messages is everything is grace. And up front, I say that's really tricky to say, because so often in our culture, words like that are used as a way of repressing or bypassing some of the human messiness that exists. We are complex creatures, and our awakening happens as we go right into the complexity of who and what we are. When we open to the possibility, so if you're listening, I don't think you should just assume everything is grace just because somebody says it. But you can try it on and experience, how does it set up your challenge in a different way? For instance, when I open to that message, I find that in it, I am seen and held. And in it, all around me is seen and held. Everything without exception. Now, in that place, my ability to be gentle with myself and the world, my ability to receive compassion, to offer compassion, I'm at the well there. And then the challenges are met with that resource and that power.
Thank you. This is this is wonderful. Thank you. There are many things there to get. Another thing that came to my mind, you said that you enter each moment. I think that was the phrase you used, with looking at it as a teacher also, and that's also a fantastic for me frame into, or pre-frame, because you do it before the next experience or moment. So I really like how that sounds, and as a practice also.
Right.
Um, I would like to discuss some things about your talk, which I was telling you earlier. I enjoyed very much the warmth of the delivery and how inspiring also it was. There were some points that, when I was listening to it, it reminded me. I suppose you must have read the Surrender Experiment, Michael Singer, who just allowed things to happen, saying yes. And so it's a very empowering story. But from that, I want to ask, we started our conversation about that silence, the presence, the silence through which you had the idea or the suggestion to build a monastery out of thin air where you were
Right.
a nun. So uh, that's something that you achieved, and it is so beautiful the way that you describe it and how everything came together, or synchronicities, or these beautiful things that show the order of the universe, if I can call it like that with my language. But the question, there is a question coming through that. I'm just trying to express it. Is that moment you described for the silence, the presence that came as an idea, and you said yes? Can you share that moment with me, the way that now, and with the listeners? So, because I think it is, uh, for me, these kinds of moments are the important moments that we must listen, and there are moments like that many of us don't listen. So I think that's the frame that I would like to discuss this topic today.
Right. I love that. Thank you so
Mm.
much. And there is so much to explore with that. So, in that experience of the TED Talk, that instance in my life, I had been in a North Dakota monastery that had ritual and silence, and it was well established, and we lived off the land. And when I joined the community in Texas, I loved that monastic lifestyle as well, so much. But one of the things we didn't have that we could count on was complete silence,
Mm.
because we were right on the edge of town, and our friends would visit us a lot, and we loved them. So this is not a complaint upon their visits. They were always bringing us wonderful things and coming for prayer. And so it wasn't that, but deep within me, I was yearning for silence. There was a deep
Mm.
fire within me. And that moment happened. First of all, I think it was orchestrated unknown by me, that I'm participating in a mystery. So I think that's the first step that happens in our lives. We're brought into existence, and if only we could realize what that actually means, that we are brought into existence through love. I mean, what that actually means, we wouldn't suffer from such low self-worth if we really understood what that meant. So coming from that, I went out back for the meditation time. And for an unknown reason, that yearning became this really big fire within me. And I began pouring myself out in supplication, in asking. I'm yearning for silence. I'm yearning for solitude. I want my monastic life the way I've had it for the past 5 years. I'm yearning to be in the richness of that steady solitude. And as I stood there, I remained as an open question, because I was so in touch with what was at my core that I knew there would be an answer. I didn't know what the answer would be. And I believe that's true for every human being. When we come to the real simple desire that's at the core, that's at our center, that's like a soul desire, that's playing itself out, we taste a little bit of the power of being in touch with that. It's not like 5 layers out. When we're complaining, it's layers out. When we're defending, it's layers out. But when we're just there and we're vulnerable, there's something very immediate about our experience. So I knew it would be answered. And as I was there in silence during the meditation, it just came from within. Build the permanent monastery. And it wasn't my own voice. It wasn't a voice I recognized or didn't recognize. I knew it was love speaking or source or God speaking, but it was light. And when I heard that, I came to a certain peace and I gave a really big yes. And that's another example that I think is universal, is that when we are in touch with ourselves deeply, we are spontaneously give a yes to life. It comes from a place that is not compromising ourselves. It is ourselves. And that yes is this fullness of being. And we co-create in that moment with that yes. We are co-creating with the uncreated, which is so powerful. And so in that experience that happened probably within 15 minutes, everything within me changed. And I didn't know what was going to happen or how it was going to happen. And as you gleaned from my TED Talk, which you get in greater detail in the book, I had no idea I was going to be the general contractor and one of the designers. I'm building the permanent monastery. To me, that was just a general yes to it happening, not a yes, I'm going to do it. Like I didn't have any of the self-directive around it. It was much more of a surrender into. And then I stayed faithful to the surrender as it showed up, and which is every step of the way, keeping the yes, staying in the juice. And it was such a flow. It was really a flow of bliss and ecstasy. I don't know that I could have said no. It was so strong.
That's wonderful, and I really got from that what you said, that we spontaneously we say yes when we have this. A part of us really knows that it is a yes, so that immediate spontaneous yes comes. The difficulty or the challenge for many people is afterwards, when the challenges arise and that yes is started being questioned or doubted. So I remember you talk about, when you say yes, you also have to stay in the yes. So I would like your thoughts on that.
Right. And if I don't like the word work, I look at all of this as play. I try to take that hardship idea. But if you will, that's where the divine work is. And I have found, as I continue my service in the world and as I help serve others, that there are many things that we can do to draw back close to what I would say the inspiration, the deposit of inspiration is. And that's critical. That's foundational, because the seed of all that is needed to accomplish what we're meant to accomplish is right there in the inspiration. And if we stay there, we're going to discover that we're actually open to the infinite field of intelligence. I like to quote Einstein very lightly, because I've read his things a lot, but I'm definitely not a master of his work. But he mentioned that when he was oriented towards his discoveries, when he came across not coming to an answer, he realized that it wasn't cognition that got him to the answer, that it was stepping into the genius of his being. And that's what we're talking about, that's available to us. It's the air we breathe, even though we may not recognize it. And he'd sit in a chair and he'd open himself expecting the answer to what? To come to him. And he held the vigil candle for it to come. There are many things we can do that can develop the skillfulness to be able to do that. But I believe that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about staying in our yes.
That's great. And that not coming from the cognition. I have experienced it. I'm sure that the listener has experienced it as well. Maybe not paid attention to, but it is something that you give up and it comes to you exactly like that. It just appears. It's not a product of a cognitive process or an intellectual no matter how much we try sometimes to produce it like that.
Yes.
Kimberly, it's really a fascinating conversation, and I really enjoyed the different angles of some things we have discussed. I do have a couple of last quick questions that I always ask my guests, but before I ask them, share with us where can the listener find out more about you, and where do you want to direct him or her?
Thank you. And if you're listening and you want to connect with me, I want to connect with you. It's easy. It's my name, my website, kimberlybraun.com. There you can contact me. You can get on my newsletter. You can inquire about sessions. I have online courses, online community. My books are available. I have 3 books. One is poetry, all with the beloved. One is called Love Calls. And then my book that just came out is Miracles in the Naked Light, which I'm hoping will kind of let the reader reach in and discover how much they're walking in a field of miracles. So kimberlybraun.com.
That's great. Thank you. And so let me ask you the 2 questions I always do. And the first one is,
Okay.
what does personal development mean to you?
I love these. These are such great questions. Now, remember, I'm a poet and a mystic. I can speak very
Even better.
systematically.
That is fantastic.
Personal development is the response, that it is the response to the call within your very being to discover and become who you are fully. It involves perspectives and practices, but it is more an exchange, a live, dynamic, pulsing exchange that we can say no to, but we can never get away from.
And hypothetically speaking, if you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give her?
So my mystical experiences started exploding right about that time. So it's maybe I'll go back to 17 years old, because I was in a dark night of the soul at that moment.
More useful to get advice then. Yes.
Yeah. You are loved. You are loved. Relax into knowing that you are loved.
Thank you. Kimberly, thank you very much for this conversation we had today. I want to wish you all the very best with your mission and your contribution. I would like to end this conversation today by asking you to give us some kind of actionable parting wisdom. So, what's one piece of advice or some simple practice our listeners can incorporate based on this conversation we had today to maybe connect more with the presence or something that we have been talking about
And be
today?
playful. I'd like to leave you with an invitation
Mm.
to let your breath connect you to the deeper parts of yourself and to use it in this practical way. So most human beings have a very busy schedule, lists and calendars. And if you're listening, probably if you're being responsible, you have many things you are doing and need to do each day. What's a very playful practice is this. Let's say, as we're ending this call, we click the end button. And before moving into the next step, we just stop and take one big breath. And then imagine that your body is smiling. And do that from moment to change, to change, to change. And you'll find that you'll start to really embody that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aji. It's great to be with you.